So we want to welcome everybody to this presentation. We have a bunch of folks that are interested in this. I find that fascinating, Doug. There's a lot of hybridization that's happening in the government, and we're going to talk about that. And for those of you that are here, this is the disclaimer that GSA gives us for you so that you can participate. So it's not endorsed by GSA or anything like that. And your participation is not endorsement either, so that we can have the conversations here on GovBrief. If you would like to engage with us, we love that, don't we, Doug?
We do. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we love that. And hang on, Matt, you're coming in. I'll make sure you can share.
We love doing webinars, but we like real, honest to goodness, face-to-face, heart-to-heart conversations even more.
Isn't that nice? Yeah, we're getting closer to that, I think. But if you'd like to participate, you can raise your hand. You can pop into the Q&A. I'll make sure I take a look at the chat as well. And if it's something that you don't want everybody else in the mother to see, send it to matt.sweet@divine.com. So that way you can get to you. So here we go. Watch this, Doug. Best briefing ever from Barb from Education says adaptive is explained. I think we can probably help with that. James from HHS, the speaker, that would be you, Doug, doesn't talk over our heads.
Okay.
There you go. Bruce, best briefing ever if you just learns one thing new. And Cecilia, the concept of fusion teams were included. Wow, that's an interesting one. Mustafa, great name from ACF. I can finally learn how to get support I needed during the significant transition during the pandemic. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that for you, Mustafa, but we will be talking about hybridization, and maybe that'll weave into what you need. Catherine from NRC, it provides concise, knowledgeable information. I hope that is true. Jamie from USDA received information that will benefit the office and division I work in. That's the whole idea, right, Doug?
Yep, absolutely.
And Derek, there are slide decks to review at a later date. Watch this, Derek. Hold on one second. I got something for you right now. And everybody else, we can download the presentation. I'll do my best to keep popping that in there for people to come in late. So I got that. And if Zoom works, that's for Teresa. It's the best briefing ever if Zoom just worked. I'm not sure if Teresa's here or not, but we'll see. All right, so here's what we want to address. Letitia, what does hybridization architecture look like in the federal workspace? I do believe that is the topic of discussion, right, Doug?
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
All right. And now Reynolds asking, how might AI be used in the VA? Is that part of hybridization? Is AI in that too? Or are we going to push that to something else?
Well, we mentioned it, but we don't spend a lot of time on AI in this one.
So Reynolds, we might have to take that one offline. Catherine.
So we have people who can talk to that.
That's for sure. Can a case for in-person presence in office be made justified post-pandemic? Great question. Bruce, enterprise software as cloud service for radiation oncology. No idea what that is, Bruce. We'll see what we can do to address that very specific question later. Charlamar, how to work effectively in hybrid environments and what is the future of hybrid work? I love that. That's a great one, isn't it? Awesome. All right. So now we're going to ask.
And I would say these are great questions. I'd say most of them could be a whole webinar by themselves.
I believe so. So why are you here? Are you in the hot seat for a hybrid project? Are you trying to get your head about hybrid technology? I'm trying to get my head around the hybrid workplace. I want to be part of a hybrid dialogue, or your boss made you come. You can be honest with that. We got Weisenheimers all over the place, don't we? All right, and we got a bunch of folks that are coming back. We appreciate you guys joining us and continuing the conversation, because that's what it's all about. Hey, Matt Sweet, how you doing there, big man?
Doing great, Dave. How are you?
Doing all right. So tell us a little bit about Divine. This is Matt Sweet. He handles business development with Divine. So tell us what in the world you do there.
Absolutely. So I am the director of federal solutions on that one. So we've been in business for 20 years. We're an 8A certified firm. And we have contracts with the Department of Energy and SSA and tons of commercial work. Again, in business for 20 years. So we're not a fly-by-night firm, but we did just get our 8A in 21. So awesome. We have that until 30. So
2021, yeah, you get an extra year, don't you, for being COVID? Was that part of that?
It was. So we're good to 2030.
Awesome. And you also have a GSA contract, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're working now on Oasis Plus, so it's a big endeavor. So
Oh boy, that's all. That's going to be fun. That's a fun one.
absolutely. And I just
All
want
right,
to thank
well,
everyone for their time and for coming. So
oh, you better believe it, man. It's great. And so I'm going to end that poll. I'm going to start another one right away because we're going to be talking about hybridization throughout this whole thing. Let's share this real quick for everybody. So nobody's on the hot seat. A lot of people trying to get their head around it. And then folks have been here before. It's great. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much for that. And I got to go back and close that out. I often do that. So, all right, here we go. So the next one is, what is going on in your agency? So we have a lot of different agencies that are here and a lot of more that are going to be watching this later. I've talked to a couple of people myself. So hybrid IT architecture, hybrid work environment, and hybrid processes. And we're going to talk about all those, aren't we, Mr. Doug?
We are.
All right. So let me see if I can do this without a warp in the time-space continuum. Boom. Let's see. All right. So let's get right into it. What's on your mind today about what we want to talk about? Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Does it work? All right, cool.
Yeah, you still running the poll?
Yeah, we're on the poll, but you got your topics too.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So after a couple of introductory points, we're going to just take a step back and look at the federal initiatives or the federal computing strategies over the last dozen or so years. And what do we mean by hybrid everything? What does that really mean? And so it's kind of a bold claim, but we'll see why that's really true. We'll talk about agency challenges and really what you're up against and try in adapting various technologies in this hybrid world to serve the public and get things done. And what that means in terms of being a dynamic organization, a dynamic agency. And we have some case studies at the end if we get that far, but they will be in the deck that we share. And we'll talk about maybe what comes next.
That's fantastic. So, and you started to talk about this several months ago, the hybridization of everything, because it's not just one way or another now. It's kind of mixing everything together. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and this really is it's not at all a new idea. This quote, this article I came across was over 30 years ago it was in Fast Company magazine when it was a brand new magazine. They talked about in older organizations, the organizing principle was discrete everything. These people did function A and these people did function B, and they never talked to each other and they never worked together. But these days, it's more about interdepartmental, interagency, cross-functional, integrated systems, sharing information, being collaborative. And so it's even the people themselves these days have become the hybrid, which what we mean by that is that people wear more than one hat is the cliche. And I think that's pretty much true for everybody. I don't know many people, I should say, who have exactly one job from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and in the modern world here.
And speaking of that, let's take a look at this. So folks that are interested in hybrid architecture, hybrid work environment, almost everybody, right? Because that's pretty much where we are. And then whether it's working or not, sort of works pretty well. One person says it works great. We appreciate that. So when we're talking about this, a lot of things wind up wrapping around IT. So it gets funneled into this enterprise architecture, which revolves somewhat around IT, but it's not just IT, right?
That's true. In the most traditional sense, enterprise architecture refers to the enterprise structure itself too, not just the technology that supports it, but the behavior and in the commercial world, we talk about the value proposition, but in any case, it's really the purpose. What are we spending taxpayer money for, and what benefit is the agency providing to either to other agencies or directly to the public, and so on. But for this discussion, we'll focus on the application of digital technologies as key enablers of your agency and service of its constituents. And to go even a little further, adaptive enterprise architecture recognizes the need for continuous improvement. Things are changing all the time. There's always more demand for for better, faster service, and everything is the only constant is change. Right? The environment and the requirements are changing, and sometimes they're brand new. Oh, I never thought anybody would ask for that.
That leads us to some federal initiatives that are coming down the pipe. And cloud obviously was a big deal 10, 12 years ago when they were putting that out. Tell us about what you're thinking about that.
Yeah, so 12 years ago, there was the Federal Cloud Computing Strategy was published in 2011, and at that time, cloud computing was not so widely adopted as it is today. It was kind of a brand new thing. Everybody was afraid of it from a security point of view.
They still are.
They still are, yes. And yeah, some of that's just sort of a hangover, and because it can be made very, very secure these days. But in 2011, there was a significant problem to solve, which was low asset utilization and fragmented demand for resources, lots of duplication, and just things that were hard to manage and difficult to procure. And the cloud was seen as part of the solution to overcoming that. And so in 2011, cloud computing was seen as having great potential to deliver public value faster, more efficiently. 8 years on, the next major policy document, if you want to call it that, was called Cloud Smart, came out in 2019. And by this time, a lot of people have more experience with the cloud, but there's still lots of room to address inefficiencies and improve service delivery. And some of the questions about the cloud became more focused. They became a little more clear. Still, the procurement and long lead time was an issue. Security has been the issue of the future, and it always will be. Mm-hmm. And of course, when you're talking about moving things out of an on-premises environment into the cloud, you have workforce considerations, because a lot of things you do are the same in IT, whether you're doing it on an on-premises platform or in the cloud. But there are significant skill sets to upskill the team with to operate and maintain cloud solutions.
It is working though, right? I mean, the agencies have adapted and adopted, but they're finding that some things, at least from the cloud perspective, some things can't be put out to the cloud and shouldn't be, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, yeah. For example, I mean, just a small example, a physical security system around a secure facility of some kind, doesn't matter what agency it is. You shouldn't have your video recordings and your sensors for your gates and your doors and all the stuff that you use to manage that. That shouldn't be anywhere except on premises. Should not, or in a tightly controlled spot down the private network. It shouldn't be in the cloud.
Yep.
As one example. And
now GSA does have some guidance on this now for where we're heading next, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because in 2011 and in 2019, these were high-level sort of government CIO, very broad computing strategies and directives. And now by 2021, GSA is putting out pretty specific guidance, and not to say that they're telling you what to do, but they're talking about the things you should consider. Things like cost effectiveness and manageability, performance and reliability, certainly security and privacy comes up all the time. And those IT workforce requirements. Is your technical team properly skilled to support a hybrid cloud or a multi-cloud environment? And by multi-cloud, what do we mean by, I'll take a moment to define these. Hybrid cloud, we mean that you have some of your systems, some of your core systems are on premises in your agency facilities, and as they should be, as they need to be, or it's because of where they always were. But there's some part of the solution, some part of the whole IT footprint for your agency that is suitable for the cloud that sits over there. So some of your IT work is done on premises, some is in the cloud, and that's what we call hybrid cloud. And of course, there are trade-offs there. There's price differences. There's reasons to be in the cloud. There's reasons to stay on premises. And a lot of times you've got to figure out how to move data back and forth. And multi-cloud, if I can just pause on that one just for a second.
Okay.
Multi-cloud is maybe you've got some things in the Azure FedRAMP space and some other or in the AWS FedRAMP space, and that's what we mean by multi-cloud. And you can have hybrid cloud, multi-cloud at the same time. You can have part of your solution on premises, part of it in Azure, part of it in AWS, maybe somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's no different than what you would normally have. You had different systems even in your house, right? Because you're and there's no difference. And
all right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've got I can't say their names out too loud because they'll start answering me, but there's Google Nest here and there's Alexa down the hall, and okay, so far nobody's answered me yet. But yeah.
And what's important to know is that there isn't a one size fits all. There's no one solution to complete it. And
yeah, and that's exactly what the GSA cloud architecture guidance was about. They were saying, well, here's some good things to keep in mind. Here's some design patterns or some frameworks that make sense to use, but they're not telling the agency what to do. They say there is no one size fits all, and that's why the whole idea of enterprise architecture is something that you can teach or explain, in a 1 hour webinar is challenging, because it's about finding the solutions, the high level solutions that do fit your particular environment, your particular agency. And it's always different. The answer is always different. The architecture, the art and science comes in and knowing what the key considerations are and the frameworks and how to apply them.
Oh.
And right here on this is from 2023. So we've gone from 2011 to 2023. And in 2011, a lot of talk about the cloud, and they're still talking about the cloud. But if you look at the federal CIO's priorities in 2023, cloud is one of 5, and still a priority to drive adoption of cloud services where they're secure and appropriate. Still an issue of recruiting and fostering federal IT talent to support the solution wherever it is. And everybody talks about data today. If you don't have data, you can't have AI. And if you don't have data, without data, you don't have information. Without information, you can't make decisions. TBM, Technology Business Management. A couple of slides ago, there was some talk about duplicate systems and redundancy and unnecessary redundancy. And that's still a thing to guard against, that we don't have 5 solutions for the same problem. And that's a little bit what technology business management is about. It's the managing the business of IT in the federal space, making sure that we're spending the money wisely. We're not spending the same, not spending $1 on the same solution twice, and so on. And reading from right to left, cybersecurity, of course, protecting our federal networks and information from the bad actors. And not just the bad actors, but just from the fat fingers of anybody who's got their hands on the system from one day to the next. And there was one of my bosses, a CIO, one time told me, he pointed out that the thing that kept him awake at night wasn't external bad actors. It was people just pressing the wrong button because they hadn't had their coffee.
Or just pressing the wrong button because they're people and we all make mistakes, right?
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
So cybersecurity is partly about keeping the bad actors out, but it's also about resilience and making sure that when something does happen, even if it's not a bad actor, that we're able to rebound and keep moving.
It's funny that you mentioned it. Some of that is a combination of the two, right? So I was years ago down at the Department of Transportation, and 2 speakers didn't show up. So I pinch hit. I just said, hey, if you're crazy enough to put me up there, I'll get up there. And I had a bunch of CISOs and CIOs in the room. And I said, what's the biggest issue you got? And they talked about phishing, right? So it's a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
You have bad actors wanting to do things, and then you have people that, hey, it looks real, and that one click, right, get you in trouble.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's not going to go away either.
And internally at Divine, we have cybersecurity training for every employee every month, and you got to keep people on their toes for those phishing attacks and all those other things where they're trying to get you to click a bad link or enter your credentials on a fake site.
Next thing you
Vigilance is the
know,
name of the game there.
it's a big deal.
it's-
So
and
I'm gonna pop this. I'm gonna pop up this here. What was your agency struggling with? Is it technology, information, the organization? Like you said, Doug, it isn't just IT, right? We're gonna get into the next phase, and a lot of folks, the hybrid work environment is still a challenge, even though we've all been sort of working through that for the past 3 years. I don't know. There's this thing called COVID. Have you heard of that, Doug? I never heard of it.
I not only have I heard of it, I've had all the shots and I still got the
I still got the doggone bug.
a couple times. Fortunately,
All
it
right.
wasn't severe.
So as folks are working on this hybrid everything, maybe not, right?
Yeah. But that is the general trend, is hybrid everything. And there's always good exceptions. And even like we talked about the exceptions of cloud technology versus on-premises, there's good reasons not to do some things. And
Oh boy.
we'll come to those counterpoints later on. But in all this, forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but I know we've got these enduring imperatives, whether we're looking at it from the lens of 2011, when they're just starting to put together a cloud strategy, or 2023, when we're trying to figure out how to do the best with what we have where we are today. We've got to deliver public value and improve operational efficiency and respond faster.
You better believe it.
But
And
the idea of hybrid everything, it materializes, if I can use the fancy word, materializes the idea that one size doesn't fit all. So in other words, we all know that we've decided that one size doesn't fit all, and one of the reasons, or one of the ways to respond to that is, one part, something from column A and something from column B. You put them together and you create the unique solution for your requirements. But it also becomes a preference. Once you see how well hybrid things can work, it becomes a preference and a way of doing business, not just something that's just driven by practical necessities. It becomes an architectural preference, if you will.
mm-hmm. And some of it's technology, and some of it you mentioned before is there's different roles that then things start to shift within organizations to be able to manage it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for those who are interested in the slide deck and download it later, there's several slides about some of these things that are summarized here. But hybrid information technology is what we talk about a lot in this context. Like the cloud, the hybrid cloud example is the most obvious one. But typically you're talking about things where you've got disparate technologies. One that looks like an animal, looks like a duck, and one looks like a horse. But you put this is a bad analogy, but you put the horse and the duck together on the job and get it done.
It's a huck or a dorse.
Yeah. And hybrid roles. This is traditionally, and this traditionally probably means 20, 30 years ago, because I think at least certainly within the last generation or so, the very narrowly focused role has become more and more rare.
Mm-hmm.
People have to do one thing in the morning and something else in the afternoon, or every 15 minutes they might have to change hats. But what that means for information technology is a very basic level. Sometimes you've got somebody that has access to multiple systems. So how do you secure that? Where this one person may have to have elevated access in more than one place because they have more than one role.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or how do you enable them to do their job in multiple systems at the same time? And can you go back, Dave? I want to spend just a couple minutes on, not even a couple minutes, just a few more minutes on this. Hybrid teams, I think, I'm intrigued by the question about fusion teams. I think we're mostly talking about the same thing. We're talking about teams that are formed out of different agencies or different departments within the agency that can develop a more holistic and nuanced point of view about the problem than you can get in siloed teams. A hybrid work environment, somebody had a question about that. And all sorts of interesting organizational behavior questions come out of hybrid work environments. There's performance management things. There's how do you develop and maintain an organizational culture when people aren't coming to the office every day, because as we know, culture is created and sustained through conversation. And we can have great conversations by Zoom and Teams and all that. But the real conversations come when we're sitting across the table in the lunchroom and you're having your peanut butter and jelly and I'm having my tamale. And we're just talking honestly about the challenges that we have here at work.
Yeah.
And hybrid processes, this is a little harder to explain, but this is things where an end-to-end agency business process where it's not carried out entirely by one team or one organization, where information is being shared and that's vital to the completion of this process, but it's coming from somewhere else in the middle of the process or in the end, or there's different disparate consumers of the results. And that's what we mean by hybrid processes. All right, so a little bit more a deeper dive here on the technology side. As we've said before, this commonly means that some of our stuff is on premises and some of it's in the cloud, and they can be legacy solutions on premises or things that just don't belong in the cloud for security reasons or operational reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And but in the hybrid world, you might be talking about the cloud, also the cloud native solutions. That is things that were built for the cloud, and they can be private or they can be software as a service. And software as a service has different implications for, especially for sensitive information. You don't want to necessarily be on those multi-tenant arrangements where numerous organizations, public or private, are really using the same service and potentially subject to each other's accidents. And there are some things that are hybrid native, there's technologies that are emerging that are built for the hybrid solution. In the past, the hybrid solution was, well, this was all built for the on-premises, and this thing over here was all built for the cloud, and so we'll somehow make them work together. But these days, technology vendors have recognized that the hybrid solutions are real and they're permanent, and so they build things that help you manage the whole mesh, all the moving parts. We're seeing more and more hybrid information processing, and here's a reference to AI. Somebody asked about AI. In the past, you write a program, you had a business rule, you turned it into an algorithm, and you answered questions that were predetermined, and you had a simple rule-based way of getting the answer. Now with AI ML, machines are getting more and more able to identify patterns and to identify exceptions and even suggesting new questions. And the hybrid information processing model is a combination of both. There are some questions you're always going to want to ask, like, how much do I have to pay this month? What's my payroll this month? Those are very deterministic questions. But you might be using the same data in an AI ML solution to predict when am I going to have a peak of vacation requests next year based on past behavior. And that's kind of a silly example, but more and more we're seeing artificial intelligence and machine learning solutions dropped into traditional data processing.
That's right.
Ecosystems to solve specific problems and to make things a little more transparent, if you will. And hybrid devices, just a mention of technologies here. We talk about the Internet of Things. The world around us is analog, but to make sense of it in a digital perspective, we have to translate that, and we use these Internet of Things devices. So every IoT device, pretty much by definition, is a hybrid device. It's some way of perceiving the real analog world and turning it into digital information.
And IoT means what?
The Internet of Things.
Internet of Things. Just making sure we don't drop any out unnecessary.
Yeah. So
extensive.
a simple example is a security system is door sensors, and it can be your secure federal agency facility, or it could be the Simply Safe devices here on my windows and doors in the house here.
Oh, you can do toasters and refrigerators and everything. Everything's connected to the
Yeah.
internet.
Well, yeah.
Everything's wireless. Don't know why you need all that stuff, but I'm sure somebody will make sense of it someday.
Well, here's why you need it. I got off a plane in Dublin, Ireland one Sunday morning, and I opened my app on my phone, and I realized I'd left the garage door open all night, and I was able to close the garage door from Ireland.
Well, that is an accomplishment of accomplishments, Doug.
But that's the Internet of Things. That's what we're
That
talking
is exactly right. Wouldn't be able to do that in the 1950s. I could tell you that.
Yep. And another silly example. I was in India a couple of weeks ago, and I learned that my wife had gone grocery shopping. And sometimes when you're grocery shopping, it takes a while to put everything away, and you tend to leave the door open on the refrigerator. So
And it told you in India?
It told me in India that the refrigerator door had been open for more than 5 minutes.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know how connected Doug is.
Mm-hmm. So there
That's
you go.
pretty connected, Doug. And I'll tell you, it's funny the story that you were mentioning about all of our little home devices, because you can't even use the word Alexa, Amazon, Google, anything anymore. So
That's right.
Yeah.
and it's really bad when there's a commercial for it.
Exactly. I was going to say the same thing. It doesn't even have to be you. It can be just.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, now, heterogeneous, man, that's a big word.
Yep. Heterogeneous, heterogeneous, however you want to pronounce this. You can put the emphasis on several different syllables there. Hybrid and heterogeneous are not exactly the same thing. They're kind of related terms, but so far in hybrid, we've been talking about using different dissimilar parts in concert to perform different functions, but all together to enable an entire process. So the individual parts are doing different things. In a heterogeneous architecture, we may have dissimilar parts doing exactly the same thing. We talked about multi-cloud before. You might have part of your solution is on AWS and part of it is on Azure, part of it's on premises, and it might be all three of those capable of doing exactly the same thing. And here's why people do that. It's especially important in mission critical applications, whether it's defense or homeland security, something like that. When you have a heterogeneous footprint like that, heterogeneous meaning that you've got, again, multiple solutions for the same problem, but they're all a little different. They become much more difficult to attack in a cyber attack, because most cyber attacks are specifically designed for one particular technology. So if you've got everything in one technology, and you can have the greatest backups in the world and the greatest recovery plan, you're still going to be down while you're restoring things. But in a heterogeneous solution and this is the difference between redundancy and resilience.
I agree.
A heterogeneous solution can create resilience, where if one of those three solutions is attacked, it can go offline. The other two will stay up, and they're not vulnerable to the same attack. So, and they are more expensive to operate because now you've got three sets of the same thing, and you're paying three vendors for an entire solution. But if it's a defense application or a homeland security application, it's mission critical. You can't afford to be offline for seconds or minutes. Sometimes you got it, and that's so. The bad actors aren't just always trying to steal our social security numbers. We have to worry about the bad actors who are just trying to cripple us operationally.
That's fact too. So we were talking about agency challenge. I'm going to share this out with you. This is what we talked about before. A lot of different reasons for challenges, right? So give us an idea what your take is on some of the ones you've heard from agencies.
Well, if I think about everything that an agency has to do, it's kind of overwhelming, and in some ways, I'm glad I'm on the outside looking in, or at least on the outside being willing to help. Obviously, you've got a specific agency mission, and you need to deliver that to the public with excellence and responding ever faster to constituent needs. As federal agencies, you've got not only laws and regulations and policies, but you've got all your internal procedures. You got the GSA looking over your shoulder. You've got to follow the guidelines and the CIO priorities. all this while adapting to changes in the political and social and economic environment. I'm sure.
Changes in political, social? No changes.
Yeah, it was like hourly. And but the good news is, while you have to adapt, you can adopt these new technologies to help you go farther and faster and cheaper. And of course, adopt isn't, that's only one word, but you've got to have that workforce. And you can't just buy it tomorrow because you've got a lot of sunk investment, prior investments. You've got to maximize the value of that before you just turn it off and buy something new. All the while maintaining security and improving security and countering cyber threats and trying to be smarter than the bad guy and doing it all on time, on budget, and sometimes a schedule that's too short and a budget that's too small.
Everybody here, nobody has a problem with the budget or the timelines. Nobody here has that.
Well, if nobody had that, you wouldn't need good project managers.
That's exactly right.
To manage scope, schedule, and resources.
I don't think I've ever gone into an agency. I just have unlimited budget to solve this problem. Never heard that. I don't think so. All right.
Yeah.
But to your point, the direction doesn't change. We got to have the deliverables, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I keep pounding away on this here.
Yeah.
Deliver public value. So what does that look like in the real world here? And how do you respond to all this dynamic environment? And in my opinion, responding to a dynamic environment requires internal adaptability. So outside the circle, you've got the external environment, very little which any of us can control. And we've got inside the circle the things that we can at least touch, even if we can't control them. but we have a greater degree of control over these things. And so this dynamic organization, this dynamic agency is a bit of a theoretical ideal, but this is just a way of thinking about how to be quick on your feet and adaptable. In response to an externally changing environment, a fast changing world. It's an aspiration. It's never fully achieved because you want to be fast on your feet, but sometimes it takes 3 years to get that procurement done or build that new system. And but there are lessons to be learned from these things. They're instructional for everyone. But 4 common traits about adaptable organizations is that they're a learning organization. That is, they take time to do post-mission briefing, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
Debriefs, lessons learned. They're disciplined. They've got repeatable processes, and they try not to reinvent the wheel, and they've got a proven way of doing things, which is a little bit of a contradiction with what I just said about learning, but it means you learn together and you decide to change the discipline together. Whatever your process is that you're following with great discipline, you keep doing that until you learn different.
Yep. Love that.
Yeah. And you're transparent. You're transparent both internally and externally, and you're connected both internally and externally.
Yep. And adaptability being it, I couldn't agree more. And sometimes there's some folks that have been maybe in your organization, not necessarily, maybe not in somebody else's organization, might just have some holdovers and legacy that you have to pull kicking and screaming every once in a while, right?
Mm-hmm. So how do we achieve this from an enterprise architecture point of view? We can talk about the organizational aspects, as we did a moment ago, about being learning organization and disciplined and transparent and connected to each other and connected to our constituents. But to move the technology, we have to think about how we can change that from an architecture point of view. And the traditionally slow-moving elements of the ecosystem, which are things like the massive data centers and big investments in custom or off-the-shelf software. We've got to get to the point where some of these things are easier to change and replace or remove entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the way to get there is to break down the monoliths. That is the things, the giant, the 500-pound gorillas. We got to get some smaller monkeys. That's a terrible way to say it. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
But the monolithic systems have to give away to integrated hybrids, swappable components on low friction platforms. What do I mean by that? A low friction platform means that's something where you can plug something in, it slides right in, or you can slide it right out. And there's every time I look at the marketplace of applications and solutions, whether it's on Amazon or AWS, the list of swappable components is mind-boggling. There's solutions for everything.
Mm.
You don't like the one you got, you swap one in, swap one out, and that's at a very low level inside of applications. But the same concept applies. Things are much easier to change than they used to be, just because they're not typically, even in the data center world, they're not using the megawatts of power like they used to. Some are, but certainly over at the Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they're doing massive computing, and NSA does massive computing. Those are hard to swap out. But the everyday operational systems are much more lightweight and much more less dependent on the heavy infrastructure than they used to be.
Yep, yep.
Finally, the last point on this slide here was about just the way we approach enterprise architecture. What we're seeing is that it used to be a really esoteric specialty where there was a guy in the corner, or a guy or a gal in the corner, or a group that did enterprise architecture and told everybody else how to build their stuff. And now that's giving way to a few people in the organization who are architect types, who think about frameworks and guidelines and overall patterns, and keep on top of the changes in technology. But the architecture itself as a practice is becoming more community-based within IT organizations. And we're seeing that in a couple of different places that we've worked. And innately adaptive technology. So, as I mentioned a long time ago, there are things now that are built not only specifically for the cloud, but they're built for multi-cloud. And cloud means a lot of things to different people. It can mean, let me take a pause and take that question where it says community-based. When I said community-based, I was referring to enterprise architecture as a practice. And some people call it a center of excellence within an organization. Some people call it a community of practice. So rather than all the architecture decisions being top down, I'm thinking of the applications people and the data people and the infrastructure people, the security people forming a community to jointly make architectural decisions.
Does that make sense, Tawana? Just want to make sure that there we go.
Okay, there you go.
All right, Doug.
That's what I meant. Yep. Yeah, I didn't mean like we're gonna have a town hall with the people from who work at the 7-Eleven. Ask them what they think. That's not what I meant by community.
You can if you want, if that's your deal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Great question.
No. Great question.
Tawana says no.
Yeah, great question. I often mean these things. I know exactly what I mean, and without questions, I have no way of knowing if I'm being understood or not. So appreciate
Awesome.
the question. Yeah. So sure, innately adaptive technologies. One of the things that's adaptive, I've talked a lot about things you can plug and play, you can swap in, you can swap out, but also just by nature on whether any of the hosting providers provide elastic computing, and there's a couple kinds here. Sometimes they call it horizontal and vertical scaling, where in vertical scaling you have something, and when demand is low, it can shrink itself. When demand is high, it can get bigger. And horizontal scaling though means maybe you've got entire copies. Like, for example, in IT, we often have a production system and a development system and a test system. And sometimes we need several test systems, and the ability to rapidly deploy another test system and rapidly destroy it when we're done is not only efficient, it saves money, and it's convenient. And you can flex your platform according to their needs, to your projects. You might have a very stable platform that's but all of a sudden you've got a new project and you haven't changed anything for a long time. Well, now we need to have a test system. So you spin up a test system, do what you need to do, and tear it down. You only pay for it for the time you use it. And that's an advantage of cloud technologies there. All right, so counterpoint. So I'm going to contradict much of what I've said before. And I'm just going to clarify, I think, maybe clarify rather than contradict. Adaptivity is really for the digital technologies that are closest to the customer, because that's where the requirements are changing. And I'm sorry, I got distracted by the question. Yeah, adaptive. So think about a continuum here, where some things you can really focus on adaptivity, but some part of the infrastructure, you're better off focusing on stability. So in your platform, like, you don't want to be switching back and forth between, I'm going to name names again, Amazon and AWS every year because somebody lowered their prices by 0.1%. You need stability in your technical foundations. But once you get a stable foundation built, then you focus on adaptivity for the technologies that are closest to the customer.
So there are times when that whole monolithic thing is actually the right way to go, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And in the commercial world, we think of things like the ERPs, SAP or PeopleSoft or whatever they are these days, where you have one giant software suite that does all kinds of stuff. It does your payables, your receivables, manages your payroll and your supply chain, all that. And it's sometimes those are the best way to do it, but not for mission critical systems. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure.
It could be. It depends.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that was, not sure I understood the question.
So let's see. Yeah, Vernon, this is being recorded. And the handouts are, I'll make sure the handouts are popped in one more time just in case you don't get it. And then Tawana, let me see if I can get Tawana. Hold on a second, Tawana. Let me see if I can get to you and just, because you're asking all kind of great questions. Do you have a mic, Tawana?
Hello,
Hey, there she is. How you doing, Tawana? Who are you with, first of all?
I'm with HUD.
You're with HUD. Fantastic. Appreciate what you do. And so what? So you're asking a question about
when he said that the back end should have stability, I'm thinking that the back end and not switching. We have both cloud environments, and not switching the based on cost, based on what he said on the cost, not switching that backwards and forwards, especially for mission critical systems. That's what I was thinking.
Oh, yeah, and I completely.
So if it's a financial system, you want that stability there, but because we have people that for external clients that come on the front side of it, make that more adaptable for them, but not changing that back end. Just trying to get context to what you were saying.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to say it, and that's exactly what I was thinking about, the balance between stability and adaptability. You've got to have a solid foundation that you can build on and change the things on the front end in response to the changing requirements and the user needs. Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
That's awesome, Tawana. And so and you'll always find that you may have a different interface for outward facing, and you mentioned customers that may be internal customers in HUD, right?
It could be both.
It could be both, right? And gain access to that. I think one of the most important things you say, Doug, is, hey, no matter what, one size doesn't fit all, right? Thanks, Tawana. That was awesome. Thanks for being willing to pop open just like that.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Tawana. Nice to meet you.
Yep. So yeah.
You all as well. Thank you.
You bet. So there isn't necessarily a better or worse. It's just different, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's situation specific. It
Mhm.
might be better or worse in your situation, but it's certainly not
That's
better or worse for everybody.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what's next. If you're thinking about where you're headed, what you guys want to do, what's the next for you're recommending for people?
Yeah. Well, I just think you just need to think about hybridization as both an external reality, like an environmental force. You can't stop the wind.
Mhm.
Hybridization is like the wind or the rain. It's coming, and if it's not already here, and it rains on the prepared as well as it rains on the unprepared. So it's a force to be recognized and harnessed. And you can either put up a windmill or you can just go hide from the wind. And it's an opportunity to serve. I think it's an opportunity to serve the public with increased efficiency and responsiveness.
No doubt. And because it's going both ways. Do you have time to jump into a case study or two? You think?
Yeah,
All
I
right.
do. Yeah, I think we've got about 5 minutes.
Yep, we can probably do it.
Yeah, all right. Spend 1 or 2 minutes on each.
Yep.
Yeah, a few real life experiences. So here's a real multi-year journey with one of our engagements, where in 2017 everything was on premises. The applications and the data was all self-hosted in a rack of machines down the hall from the CIO's office.
Yeah.
And all sorts of good reasons about why it got that way, and all sorts of reasons why it wasn't good to keep it that way.
That's exactly right.
A lot of times with engagements, I say, come as you are, but we're not going to stay that way.
That's right. And it's iterative, right? It doesn't have to be, it's not a big bang. It doesn't have to go all at once.
Yep. Iterative or phased. Yeah.
So then you moved to a private cloud, and then you moved.
That was the next thing they did. They moved everything basically out of their home office into a private hosted situation somewhere. The next thing was to improve performance. Some of the data was better off in the cloud, even though the applications were still in the private cloud. There were some better solutions for large data to put it in the public cloud, and it did improve performance. And finally, the applications are not quite there yet, but the applications will be moving to the public cloud as well.
And I think this is right. Having it be iterative and planned out, and that migration, right?
Yeah. And some of our work is exactly that. Our entire work might have a multi-year context, but we really do the whole thing in a few months and say, here's a way to approach this over the next 2, 3, 4 years.
I think this applies to what Tawana was talking about, because you had the financial systems and working through this. Take us through this real quick.
Yep. Here's another one where there is a core application that does lots of things. It's constituent engagement, if you will. It's operational scheduling and some financial things, but the actual bookkeeping, the real financials, that's separate, and those are bolted together. There's a front end for the customer inquiries and customer messaging, and there's a supply chain piece for this particular application, and that's hybridized in a different place that's really best suited for that vendor integration for messaging to and from all the people they're buying stuff from.
So you go from the websites, you have SaaS, you mentioned that earlier, running in that piece.
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, the financials are SaaS. The customer facing stuff is all custom websites. Messaging is a combination of email and SMS. Yeah.
And then you got to deal with third parties, right?
Yep. A particular case, the whole supply chain part is a third party solution. Yeah. But best practice is, no matter how you put it together, with whatever combination of internal and external components, that your stakeholders see a consistent single solution.
Yep. I think that's where we go. And so we're gonna stop it here. If there's some additional slides that you can download, I'll make sure I'll pop this in. Any last minute things that you guys would like to talk about? I just want to make sure we get you guys wrapped up and out of here. There's some references in that as well, so it'll get you cooking. But I do want to make sure we get to this question, which is continuing the conversation. Is if you'd like to continue the conversation, we always love to continue the conversation. It doesn't have to happen right now. We can dive into something specific for what you need. And by the same token, as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to buy from anybody, but if you'd like to talk to Divine about anything, they're GSA schedule holder, 8A certified, right, Matt? And if you need to get to them through a partner, you guys have a bunch of different partners, right? You know how to make it work if an agency needs to work some magic, right?
Absolutely, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah. And we will make sure to get you that. And you will get a recap email end of the day, early tomorrow, depending on Zoom. But we'll make sure you get the presentation, links to the video. If you need a CE cert, let me know. We'll make sure you get your copy of that. And you can chat with these guys whenever you want to. Any last minute things before we jump out of here to get you out on time? We'll make sure we get that to you. If you need anything specific, you can reach out to Matt. It's matt.sweet, right? With two
Yes, sir.
T's, just messing with us with saying it wrong. Sweat. No, it's not sweat. It's sweet with two T's. And you can reach out to him. What's that?
It's sweet tea.
It's sweet tea.
Sweet tea.
Oh, is that the first time you ever heard that, Matt?
No.
Oh, I was going to say, man, that's the first time I've ever heard it. That's fantastic. It's like people saying, how low can you go, Dave? Because I'm Dave Lowe. So anyhow, so there you go.
I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate Tawana's question, but I also appreciate just the ability to just talk about some of this stuff out loud, because just the process of hearing my own voice say something.
Yeah.
Something that I learned today from that. So I hope I learned something today just by saying it all out loud, and I hope everybody else did too.
I hope so too, man. We really appreciate it. Great job, Doug. Appreciate you, man. If you need to reach out to Matt, you can do that. And if you have any additional questions, you can certainly do that. We'll get you guys out of here. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate all you guys, especially as we get wrapping stuff up for fiscal year end. We know that could be a headache for you all. So we appreciate you guys doing everything that you do, HUD and the rest of the organizations that are here. Appreciate you all. Thanks
Thank
much.
you.
And we'll see you next time. What you got there, Matt?
I said, thank you. That's all. I'm waiting.
Very good. All right, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Doug. See you guys.